His presentation will be covering the key issue that impacts merchants, and he will share some tips and best practices for optimizing Magento to maximize performance on Performance Max campaigns. And now, please welcome Mr. David Deppner.
Good afternoon. So if you're here for a talk about Magento performance, you're in the wrong room. This is going to be a talk about Google Ads' new Performance Max campaigns and how to optimize performance on them by using Magento and some of the integrations in Magento, between Magento and Google Ads. Okay. So my name is David Deppner, and I'm the CEO of a small Google Ads partner. We are small, but we're mighty. We deal with a lot of advanced integrations with Magento. And before this role, I actually worked on the merchant side for a mid-sized company in the United States selling packaging for about 10 years. So it's interesting to have been on both sides of the aisle, working as a merchant and now working with a lot of Magento merchants. So Cyberware works with all aspects of ads, feeds, tags, and analytics. So I'm going to talk about a number of these topics today as we're going through this material. We're basically going to start out with just a little overview of Google's Performance Max campaigns, what they are, and how they work, and how they're different than the previous campaign type, which is the Smart Shopping campaigns. And then we're going to get into just going through 10 recommendations for how to improve the performance on them. Some of those will be about tips in Google Ads, how to structure the campaigns and think about your organization. And then we're going to be talking about a number of things that will involve shopping feeds and conversion tracking and so on that'll help to optimize the performance as well. So whenever a company comes out with a new product, they tout it as the best thing ever. And this is always true with any new feature in Google advertising. So Performance Max campaigns are touted as improving your ROI by 15% when merchants move to them. So the thing is, it might be true, but there might be some risks as well. Performance Max campaigns don't just run shopping ads the way traditional shopping campaigns have done. In addition to showing product-based shopping ads, they actually can show video ads, they can show display advertising, and they can actually show what we think of as traditional Google search advertising as well on the Google search results page. So it's interesting that we're not just providing product data out of Magento into these campaigns. We're actually providing a whole lot of other information in what's called an asset group. So Google campaigns used to have ad groups where we'd put a collection of ads and keywords, and we'd align those so the right ads would show up when people searched for a given search string. Performance Max campaigns instead are structured around this concept of asset groups, where we don't actually design the ads. We give Google permission to do it. It's completely automated. We have to add some ad copy. We've got to add some audience signals. We might put some videos in there. We might put images in different formats. And then Google's going to try all sorts of different combinations to put ads on different platforms. A key difference with Performance Max campaigns actually has to do with how audiences work. Traditionally, Google campaigns could target particular audiences, or you could provide some information about bid adjustments to use with audiences, right? These new campaigns don't really have either of those features. Google can show these ads to anyone, and it's actually really hard to restrict how the ads can be shown. The machine learning algorithm is going to try a whole lot of stuff and then keep what works. So audiences on these campaigns are actually important in a different way because they provide some signals to the machine learning algorithm about who is most likely to convert. And it just works completely differently than we've had in any other Google campaign type so far. So because the machine learning algorithms do most of the optimization, we have a situation where we actually don't have much control. There are very few settings on these campaigns. Like, we can't mark negative keywords. We can't target particular audiences. We can only provide inputs to the algorithm to try to improve its learning. So here's some examples of what the ads look like. You can see we've got traditional shopping ads, right? This is a company that sells bike racks for cars and ski racks, kayak racks, things like that. We've got search ads, display advertising. We can show traditional graphical display advertising, product-based dynamic remarketing. Comes out of the product feeds. YouTube ads. Little note here, if you don't add videos to these campaigns, Google will create videos for you. So you probably want to add videos to these campaigns so you can control what's being shown to your customers. But on the YouTube ads, we can show products. We can show display advertising. We can show videos. They show in places like Gmail, right? So on the promotions tab in Gmail, if Google thinks a particular user would be interested in your products, they're gonna pop some ads in there. They're actually a very convenient way to experiment with a lot of the different places your ads could run that maybe you wouldn't have done in the past because the campaigns would be too small and it would be too much work to do. So let's talk about the risks. Automation can be great. Automation can come with some significant problems. Since we have very little control over the settings, when something goes wrong, we can't fix it, right? More ad variations. If Google's trying all sorts of combinations of assets in all sorts of different places across the internet, that means they're trying a lot of things that are never going to work. They might make a lot of mistakes before they hit on the things that are actually going to perform well. And a key issue is that since they're automated based on data, if we have small data sets, it can take a really long time for the machine learning algorithms to figure out what's not working. Because you have to try it a bunch of times to know statistically significantly that it's not going to work. So what do we do in the absence of settings to try to improve performance on these campaigns? The answer to that is try to provide great data to the automation, to the machine learning algorithms. We need to do everything we can to improve data quality feeding into these campaigns. And this is why the Magento integrations actually really matter a lot. So let's go through some tips. First of all, try to use all possible assets in your asset groups. Google gives you the option of adding a lot of images. You should add a lot of images because you don't know what's going to work. And you want to add a lot of images in different formats. You want square images, you want horizontal images, you want vertical images. And remember, if you don't add videos, Google's going to use those to make videos in those different formats as well. So add videos if you have them. And if you don't have them, there are some new features coming out to make it easier to create your own from static assets. Logos. We want to have logos in different formats. Right? You probably have logos for small spaces and big spaces. You want to add all those to these campaigns. On the ad copy side of things, there are options for adding text in longer fields and shorter fields, a whole bunch of different options. And you want to go through and really try to fill those in. Doing that gives the ads the opportunity to run in the most places possible. I do want to bring up that there's one competing view to this, which is maybe you shouldn't include all possible assets at first, because since that just increases the number of places the ads can run. So there is a strategy that some advertisers are using of minimizing the number of assets at first, so there's fewer experiments, fewer A/B tests to run, and then expanding them out over time as performance improves. So tip number 2 is to minimize the number of campaigns you have. And this is really about pooling more data together so the campaigns can learn faster and make better decisions sooner. So if you've got campaign A and campaign B, and they're very similar campaigns with similar goals and targets, think about combining them. There are good reasons for having different campaigns, targeting different places, advertising in different languages, or if you have products with very different product margins and you need to have different return goals. Those are good reasons. But many merchants split their campaigns by product groups, by the categories on their website, just for reporting purposes. And there are other ways to pull good reports. You shouldn't use reporting as a criteria for campaign structure. You should structure your campaigns based on what's going to perform the best in the advertising system. So tip 3 is to make asset groups for your major product lines. Remember that asset groups are how we're putting the advertising assets together. So that previous company I was showing ads for, they sell bike racks. They also sell kayak racks for people's cars. Those might be different audiences of people. So in the larger campaign that that company might have, it might be good to have an asset group for bike racks with the right imagery, the right audiences added, and another one for kayak racks that's going to show the right ads to the right people. And since they're within the same campaign, it's not going to hinder the campaign's ability to optimize. So there's a field in the Google Shopping feed called the product type, and that's often used to accomplish these sorts of goals. You can actually just set your Magento category in your Google Shopping feed in the product type field. It makes it very easy to split products into different asset groups based on your category structure. Tip number 4. Make sure your remarketing tags send product IDs. So when you send a remarketing tag that's going to add a cookie to somebody's browser and associate them with your website, if you pass the IDs of the products that they're viewing on your site, Google's going to have the ability to show these dynamic product ads to that person later on. And we want to make this happen. We want to be able to give the campaigns the ability to optimize towards these folks and show them what they didn't buy, but what they're interested in. A lot of people set this up, but oftentimes when we audit accounts, we find that they set it up wrong. The key reason is that in Magento, we're often using 2 different IDs, right? The SKU is a unique attribute in Magento. Every product has a unique SKU. But also every product has the database entity ID. And in different contexts, it might be easier to use one versus the other. So if the developer that configured your shopping feed is indexing the feed by SKU, but then somebody else set up the tagging on your front end, and when they're looking at the ID available on the product page, they see, oh, this is the entity ID. They grab the entity ID. A lot of merchants end up in this situation where they're passing the entity ID and it's not matching the SKU in the product feed, and Google suffers an inability to show the right products in the ads. There are easy fixes to this. The shopping feed actually has 3 different ID fields that can be matched to the tag ID. So there's the ID, the primary ID in your shopping feed. There's also one called the display ads ID, which is just an alternate to match on this display advertising. So the easy thing to do is add this optional field to your feed and just set it to whichever one isn't your primary ID. So if your primary ID is SKU, set your display ads ID to your entity ID. And then if you have any mismatches in the IDs, it's going to hit one of those. The other problem that comes up is Magento configurable products. If you're hitting a Magento configurable product, you're on the parent landing page, and configurable products aren't traditionally added to the Google Shopping feed. They're actually a violation of the feed spec. You need to add all the simple child products to the feed. So the parent configurable ID is never going to match the child IDs. So the way we accomplish this is the item group ID field. That item group ID field needs to basically be either the SKU or the entity ID of the parent configurable product. Tip number 5 is to use customer match audience signals. Customer match audience signals are a way that we can create audiences of actual customers of your Magento site by passing some information based on something that's user data, like their email address. We don't want to actually share people's email addresses and other personal information with anybody, including Google. So what we actually do is a little matching algorithm. We use a hash algorithm to do a one-way encryption and generate this unique ID that can't be decrypted back to their email address. If that matches any user Google knows about, Google can add them to an audience. So in practice, we create lists of people based on whatever criteria we're trying to target. We pass those lists to Google. If they match, they're added to the audience. If they don't match, Google doesn't tell us. Neither party exchanges any information about users with the other party. So audience segments can be used for all sorts of stuff. These customer match audiences, you got to do some custom programming though, potentially. There are some easy ways you can do a few things, like configure a Zapier integration. So anytime a new order comes into Magento, you're going to add somebody to a list of past purchasers. But you can do some more fancy things by actually, connecting to the Magento API or writing code that's running on Magento. And when there are purchasers of products in particular categories, you could add them to more targeted lists of people who buy those sorts of products. You can create similar audiences based on those, and we could come up with an audience of people that are similar to everybody who's bought on our website and bought a bike rack in the past, right? So techniques like this can be really useful, and adding those at the asset group level on Performance Max campaigns can help those asset groups really perform better. Tip 6, use Google's built-in audience segments. Not going to say much about this other than a lot of advertisers don't use them effectively. A lot of merchants don't really know about these. But with the new way audiences work on Performance Max campaigns, it's really easy to add in market audiences, the people that Google knows are shopping for a particular thing, or audiences based on people's life events, like people starting a business or people who are about to get married. There's some great opportunities here to improve the targeting on these campaigns. Tip number 7 is to use custom audience signals. Custom audiences, pretty cool. So Performance Max campaigns don't have the ability to do any targeting based on keywords, right? It's all automated. But we can create an audience of people who search for certain keywords on Google, and then we can add the audience to our Performance Max campaign to signal to Google that people who search for these sorts of things are the customers that are probably going to buy from us. They also have the ability to put lists of website addresses in there. People who visit these sorts of websites are also more likely to buy from us. So here's an example of a company that sells competing products to Keurig. And so they want anybody who's searching for Keurig K-Cups or Keurig flavored coffees and so on, or going to Keurig's website to just go ahead and be targeted by their Performance Max campaign. And they're signaling to Google that Keurig's customers are more likely to buy from us. This sort of thing is a great way to target your competitors' customers and get a few more of them. Tip number 8 is to improve your shopping feed data. This is a big one. I'm just going to skim a couple things here. Developers oftentimes make it work. And once it works, they walk away from it, and everybody's happy because it works, right? In Merchant Center, we often focus on the product disapprovals and fixing the things that are broken, getting it to work, getting the products available to advertise in the feed. If you look at Google's feed specification, so here's just an example from the color attribute. There's always that part at the top, the minimum requirements, right? This is what we actually need to do to get the products approved and make it so Google will serve products in the ads. But if you look further down in the feed spec, scroll down a couple screenfuls, there's this section about best practices. The best practices are information from Google about what you can do to make your ads perform better. And this is what oftentimes merchants don't really get into, and development agencies don't go down and look at the small, the fine details of what you can do to optimize these even better. So I'd recommend paying attention to the best practices of every bit of data you're sending Google. In addition to looking at the product disapprovals, the errors in Google Merchant Center, think about the warnings. These warnings are often ignored because they don't make your products get kicked out of the ads. But they're all signals about what Google expects to see. Or they're telling you if you provide this data, your ads will run better. So like in this example, we get a warning down here at the bottom about missing value, color. All right, what's going on here? Got a bunch of products for this merchant that are missing the color attribute, and Google knows these are products with a color. Think about it. The customers out there are searching for products with colors. We need to tell Google this data. So this could be a problem where the data is in Magento. I mean, Magento has a color attribute by default, right? We could have the data in there and we're just not exporting it into our feed. Or maybe we're missing this information in Magento on a number of products. But these warnings are basically clues about where you can go to make your ads perform better. Last point on shopping feeds is that the feed specification changes every year. And many merchants and development agencies are still using the best practices of 5 or 10 years ago. There are new fields that you can take advantage of, like these two. These have been out for 2 years now. Product detail and product highlights. Product highlight is a way where you can basically give the Google Shopping algorithm some bullet point lists of the key features of your products. That's interesting. That'll improve the display of the products on Google Shopping. Maybe it could be used for keyword matching if people are searching for something nuanced. Product detail is similar. Product detail is kind of like an extension on the shopping feed specification. It allows you to pass any arbitrary key value pairs in your shopping feed. Tip number 9 is to update your conversion tracking method. 2 quick points. A lot of people pull in conversion data from analytics. First of all, UA is going away in a year, so analytics is changing. You might want to eliminate that dependency. But also, issues with analytics pop up a lot in conversion tracking, and it'll often record fewer conversions than if you're recording conversion tracking directly to Google Ads. The other problem is the Magento 2 core is a few years out of date on the conversion tracking library it uses, still using conversion.js. The new global site tag library was released about 5 years ago now, and that's gtag.js. So you really need to be using that for your conversion tracking. Or do you use Google Tag Manager for conversion tracking so you get the best data possible into the algorithm. And last tip, tip number 10, set up enhanced conversion tracking. A lot of people haven't done this yet, but similar to those customer match audiences, this is a way that you can send a little bit of extra information to Google based on the user data of the user who completed the order. And when that data gets passed to Google, if there's some other conversion tracking problem or cookies are being blocked, Google can match that that user clicked on an ad, came to your website, and made a purchase. So it improves the value that you're going to track in conversion tracking. You're going to track a few more conversions and be able to attribute them to the ads better. That's better data for the Performance Max algorithm. It's going to help you optimize better. So just to wrap up, and we'll be done for now. What matters the most? Lots of assets. Large campaigns, and as few of them as possible. Pool that data together, get the most possible available in every campaign. Focused asset groups will allow you to tailor the ads to the products that people are actually looking for. The audience integrations are more important with these campaigns than ever before, and you have some really interesting options like that custom audiences that you can use in more effective ways than before. Pay attention to your shopping feed data. Like every dollar you spend cleaning that data feed and making it better is going to make you many dollars, or rupiah, right? The modern conversion tracking is the last point here. Like, bring it up to date. Make sure that you're using the latest conversion tracking techniques and do everything you can to get the most conversions tracked that you possibly can. All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, now we come to Q&A session. Mr. David, are you ready for that one?
Yeah, questions sound good.
Okay. If you guys have any questions now, I think it's time to ask Mr. David here. Is there any questions here? I think Mr. David will gladly to answer that. Okay. I think they're ready, at heart, they already know what's going on here.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Not talking about the topic that you presented, that one. I'm asking about the universal analytic and GA4. Since universal analytic will be abandoned next year, so when is the best time we need to move from the universal analytic to the GA4? So that's a simple question. Thank you.
So you're asking, since universal analytics is being deprecated, what's the best time to move?
Yes.
To GA4?
Yeah, the next year.
6 months ago. If you're trying to, if you think about GA4 and universal analytics, it's going away in a year. Many times we use things like audiences in analytics in the advertising system. The challenge, I think, is that it takes time to build up people in audiences, and it takes time to build up historical data that we can compare over time in any analytics system. And it's actually fascinating to me that very few merchants have actually made that migration already, right? Very few people have actually taken the leap. And if you want to be looking at data a year from now and be able to compare to the previous year, you need to have already implemented this, right? So I would say it's very important. It's very important. It's time to move now, and it's something that a lot of people are starting to grapple with, and that's good.
Once the new technologies present, we need to move as fast as possible.
I'm sorry. Could you hold the mic a little closer to your mouth? Soft.
So once the new technology is present, so we need to move as soon as possible. That comes up. So that's the answer that I got, right?
I'm sorry.
Boleh pakai bahasa Indonesia, nanti saya bantu.
Okay, so once the new technologies comes out, presented, we need to move as soon as possible once that's presented out.
Are you asking if when new technology comes out, should we move as fast as possible?
Yeah.
As a general question, or about specifically analytics?
The specific for the analytics.
About analytics?
Yeah.
I think it's important to move as fast as possible at this point, yes. I mean, new technology comes out, I actually don't adopt it right away typically. It's better to let other people beta test it, right?
Yeah.
But there comes a point where you need to make the leap. And with analytics, with GA4 is still very much a beta product in a whole lot of ways. They're releasing new features all the time. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's time to make the move and start building that data.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions and answer. Okay, so I think we can conclude for today.
Good.
Thank you so much, Mr. David.
All right, thank
I
you.
think the key takeaway is a great data and great integration. It's a great performance.
Yep.
Thank you so much. You may leave the stage as we're moving forward to the next session.
Thank you.
Give it applause to Mr. David here.